If you enter his bus, there is no going back, no goodbye, no trace, no grave. You enter as a human being and you vanish as a memory. People said many things about the bus, but this one truth remained the same across villages, towns, and whispered prayers. Everyone who entered was never seen again. Not once, not ever. There was no blood on the road, no broken vehicle, no accident report, just absence. Phones rang into silence, homes stayed locked, beds remained cold, and the strangest part was this. Nobody could ever say where the bus came from. It had no park, no route number, no plate number. Those who tried to wait for it never saw it. Those who mocked the stories never believed, until someone close to them disappeared. The elders warned, "A bus that looks for you is not taking you anywhere good." Yet every month, once and only once, the bus appeared. Not on a fixed date, not at a fixed time. It came on nights when the moon looked weak, when dogs refused to bark, when even drunkards felt suddenly sober for no reason they could explain. That was when the road itself would feel wrong, and that was when he would arrive, the driver. A tall man in a faded uniform, eyes forward, hands stiff on the steering wheel. He never spoke, never greeted, never asked for fare. People entered because something inside them gave up. Grief, anger, loneliness. The bus did not take happy people, and that was how the mystery grew. Until the night Kola Adebayo stepped inside. The bus did not come often. That was what made it dangerous. It appeared once every month, on a night no calendar could predict. Not during festivals, not on full moons, not on market days. It chose its own moment, like death choosing its own hour. Those who survived long enough to notice patterns said this: the bus appeared when people were weakest. A woman whose husband had just been buried. A man who had lost his job and his pride the same day. A youth wandering home drunk, arguing with invisible spirits. That was when the road would suddenly stretch longer than it should. Streetlights would flicker, then dim, and the air would grow cold, even in the dry season. Then, without sound, the bus would be there. No screech of brakes, no honk, just presence. Those who stood nearby later said the headlights did not shine forward, but downward, as if searching the earth for something buried. The doors opened slowly. The driver never turned, never blinked, never spoke. People stepped in without remembering their destination. Some later said they thought they were entering a normal bus. Others said they felt as though they had already entered before their legs moved. By morning, someone would be missing. A shoe by the roadside, a phone with unanswered calls, a house that stayed locked all day. Families cried, police searched, pastors prayed. Nothing was found. After the third month, fear became tradition. Mothers warned their children not to walk late. Men stopped drinking outside. But still, the bus came, because it did not stop for those who feared it. It stopped for those who were already half gone. And each time it appeared, the driver drove deeper, not into another town, but into a place no living road should reach. The driver's name was whispered only by the oldest villagers, Adesuwa. No one knew much about him, just that he had died many years ago, yet somehow kept driving. Some said he was a man consumed by his own greed. Others said he had made a terrible bargain with forces beyond the living. The truth was darker. Adesuwa had been a night bus driver, a man who loved money more than life itself. He carried passengers carelessly, speeding along dangerous roads while laughing at superstition. One rainy night, the bus slipped on the black mud of a ravine. Everyone died. The screams had echoed across the hills for hours, but death had rejected him. The spirits of the forest and the river, the ancestors, even the earth itself, refused to take him. The underworld would not grant him rest, so he became neither alive nor dead. His punishment was cruel. He must drive the bus forever, collecting souls for the place he himself could not enter. Every person he carried became part of his endless debt. He could not rest. He could not sleep. He could not even look away. The bus fed on grief, on anger, on despair, on the weakness of the living. People who had suffered losses, who had lost hope, who had wandered alone at night. They were the ones he chose, and the bus itself was a shadow. Its engine made no sound, yet it carried the weight of 100 stolen lives. Its headlights pierced the night, searching for broken souls. Its doors opened only for the cursed. Its seats held the doomed. Villagers whispered that on nights when the bus appeared, the air smelled of ash and old earth, like a grave freshly dug. Dogs howled, roosters refused to crow, and even the wind seemed afraid. And yet, for all this horror, there was one thing that could stop him: to call him by his true name. For a soul remembered is a soul freed. A living person who names the dead driver could break his curse if they were brave enough. That was the secret that no one had dared try, until Kola Adebayo stepped onto the bus. Kola was not weak, he was not broken. He had lost things, yes, but his heart was sharp and fearless. And he had been searching, not for the bus, but for the truth. That night, the bus stopped, as if sensing him. The doors creaked open slowly. Inside, the shadows of past passengers were pressed against the windows, faces blurred and pale. The engine whispered like a serpent, and the driver, Adesua, sat behind the wheel, hands stiff, eyes empty, a ghost of the man he once was, waiting for the next soul. Kola did not hesitate. He walked toward the driver, heart pounding but eyes steady, knowing that this was the moment to end a horror that had lasted decades. Kola Adebayo's foot hit the metal step of the bus, and the cold air inside hit him like a river in the dry season. The smell was strange: earth, ash, and something faintly sweet, like smoke from a shrine. He could hear faint whispers, like children calling from far away. But when he turned, there was nothing. The seats were empty, or almost empty. Shadows clung to the windows, pressed against the glass. Faces blurred into pale shapes that seemed almost alive. The driver did not look at him. Adesuwa's eyes stared forward, vacant, yet filled with a quite dreadful power. His hands were white, veins raised like roots under skin, gripping the wheel as if it were his lifeline to the world of the living. Kola walked down the aisle slowly, the wood of the floor creaking beneath him. Each step felt heavy, as if the bus itself resisted his presence. Then a faint whisper floated from the back. "You should not be here." Kola ignored it. He had prepared for this night. He knew the legends, the warnings, the stories of missing people who were never found. He also knew that fear was the driver's weapon, and courage was the only shield. He reached the driver's seat. Adesuwa's hands tightened. The bus engine hummed louder, vibrating through Kola's chest like a heartbeat from the underworld. The shadows in the seats pressed closer, silent witnesses, eyes like molten silver. Kola cleared his throat. His voice was steady. "Adesuwa, son of the Red Earth, you died on a Thursday. You are not at rest." The driver froze. His hands twitched on the wheel. The whispers grew louder, like a storm trapped in the bus. The lights flickered, casting long, twisting shadows across the walls. The air became thicker, almost solid, pressing down on Kola. Then the bus jerked forward. Hard, the tires screeched. The road seemed to stretch into darkness, deeper and farther than any living road could exist. The shadows shrieked silently, pressed faces against the windows. Kola didn't move. He kept speaking, naming the driver, tracing the story that had cursed him for decades. You took people because you were denied rest. You chose greed over life. You crashed that bus and the earth and spirits rejected you. You cannot take them anymore. For a moment, it seemed as if the bus was going to hurl him into nothingness. The shadows lunged. The air roared. Adesuwa's face twisted, no longer just a driver, but a tormented soul burning with centuries of despair. But Kola held firm. He had come not as a victim, but as a witness, as someone alive who remembered the truth. And then, something changed. The bus slowed. The engine's hum became a low sigh, like wind through a hollow tree. The shadows began to ripple, faces fading, mouths opening as if to speak words they had long forgotten. The driver's head twitched, slowly turning toward Kola. And for the first time in decades, his eyes met a living gaze. Not one of fear, not one of anger, but recognition. Kola knew this was the moment the curse could break. The bus trembled as if the world itself was holding its breath. Kola's words echoed in the cabin. Adesuwa, son of the red earth, you cannot take them anymore. The driver's hands loosened on the wheel. The shadows along the windows began to shift. Faces that were blurred and pale now blinked slowly, and for a moment it seemed they remembered who they were. The whispers grew louder, but this time they were not angry. They were pleas for freedom, soft voices calling out their own names. Kola could feel the air change. The suffocating heaviness that had pressed down on him since he stepped aboard began to lift, like fog burning under the sun. The seats, once cold as stone, now felt slightly warm under his hands. Adesuwa let out a low groan, a sound that was not human, nor fully ghost. It was a wail of centuries of regret and torment. His lips moved, but no words came. His eyes, once empty, now reflected the faces of the people he had taken, hundreds of them, trapped inside the bus for decades. And then something miraculous happened. A faint light began to glow from the floor of the bus. Not from a lamp, not from the headlights, from the very wood of the floor itself. It spread slowly, pushing back the shadows, revealing the faces of passengers who had long been forgotten. They were pale, yes, and their eyes carried the weight of what they had endured, but they were alive, almost. Kola knew he had to continue. The curse was fragile, like a thread stretched too thin. He raised his voice, repeating the truth of Adesuwa's story, naming each detail he had learned from the elders and the stories. You crashed the bus. You took what was not yours. You were greedy and the spirits rejected you. You are Adesuwa and you have no right to keep them. The driver's face twisted in anguish and the bus lurched violently. Kola held on to the railing. The windows rattled and the shadows screamed, a silent, hollow scream that echoed in every corner of the bus. But Kola did not flinch. He spoke louder, calling the driver by his true name over and over, and slowly, impossibly, the shadows began to rise from their seats. Faces that had stared blankly for decades now looked toward the light. The bus engine, once a hum of endless despair, now made a sound like wind rushing over dry grass, a sound of release. The darkness began to peel away from the walls, revealing glimpses of the night outside. The moon, weak but shining, the silent road stretching on. Adesuwa's hands fell completely from the wheel. His head sank forward, and for the first time, he seemed small, human again, not the monster of countless tales. Kola stepped back, exhausted but steady. He watched as the first passenger began to stir. A woman who had vanished 5 years ago, her eyes wide, trembling but alive. She whispered his name. Kola. The curse had begun to unravel, but Kola knew this was only the beginning. The bus shuddered as if it were alive, groaning under the weight of decades of stolen souls. Shadows, which had once clung to every corner like thick cobwebs, now began to lift and dissolve into faint silver mist. Faces of the missing peered through, blinking, gasping, remembering light, warmth, and the world they had left behind. The woman who had whispered Cola's name sat up fully, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. A man a few seats behind her slowly opened his mouth, gasping, as though air itself had been stolen from him for years. Others began to wake, murmuring their names, their memories, their lives. Cola's heart raced, but he did not falter. He stepped to the front of the bus again, facing Adesua. The driver had collapsed slightly over the wheel, his body trembling violently. His face, once hard and lifeless, now showed pain, guilt, and despair unlike anything Kola had ever seen. Adesua's voice finally broke the silence, rough and breaking. I cannot stop. I cannot rest. Not until someone remembers. Not until someone names me. Kola nodded, understanding the weight of centuries on this cursed soul. He raised his voice, calm but commanding. Adesua, son of the Red Earth, you took what was not yours. You fed on grief and fear. You do not own their souls anymore. You are forgiven and remembered. You may rest now. The moment the words left Kola's lips, the bus shook violently. The engine, which had hummed like a prison for years, screamed once and then fell silent. The floor beneath them glowed brighter, bathing the passengers in a soft golden light. Adesua's hands fell limply to his sides. His head bowed slowly. Kola saw tears in the ghostly man's eyes for the first time. For decades he had been denied peace, trapped between worlds, feeding on despair to exist. But being remembered, being named, broke the chains that bound him. The passengers began to rise from their seats as if the weight of years had lifted from their bones. They stumbled off the bus, blinking at the night around them, alive, whole, and free. They looked at Kola with awe, fear, and gratitude. And then, slowly, the bus began to dissolve. Its metal frame melted into dust, the seats crumbling into ash, and the wheels sinking into the road as if the bus had never existed. Adesua remained for a moment longer, kneeling at the front of the bus, whispering words no one could hear, prayers of release. Then, with one final blink, he vanished, his spirit finally crossing over to rest in the ancestral world. Kola stepped down from the bus, his heart pounding. He looked back at the empty road. The moon was pale, the night quiet, and for the first time, the road felt safe again. He knew the bus would never appear again. For as long as it was remembered, the curse had ended, and the souls it had held were free. By the time dawn broke, the forest road where the bus had appeared was quiet, as though nothing had ever happened. The mist that usually clung to the trees lifted, revealing the sun's pale light stretching across the fields. Birds began to sing cautiously, as if testing whether the night terror had truly passed. Word spread quickly through the villages. Families who had lost loved ones years ago were reunited in disbelief and tears. Children who had disappeared in the dead of night hugged their parents. Husbands and wives wept quietly, speechless at the impossible return of those they thought were gone forever. Kola walked through the village square, feeling the weight of what he had done. People stared at him, some in awe, some in fear, as though he had walked from another world. He did not boast, he did not explain. He simply watched the faces of those who had been returned to life. Elders approached him cautiously, whispering in voices heavy with reverence, "You have done what none dared, Kola Adebayo. You have remembered the dead, and in remembering, freed them all." Kola nodded. He thought of Adesua, the cursed driver, kneeling in the shadows of the bus just moments ago, whispering words of release no one else could hear. A man who had lived, died, and suffered for greed, now finally at rest because someone had the courage to remember him. The villagers began to tell the story again in hushed tones around fires and under baobab trees. They told of the bus that appeared once a month, of the driver who was dead but could not rest, and of Kola, the young man who had named him and broken the curse. And like all African folk tales worth telling, it came with its warning. If you ever wander lost at night and something appears that seems too still, too quiet, too empty, remember Kola's courage, remember the power of names, and remember that even the dead may walk, but only the living can give them peace. Kola himself walked to the edge of the village and looked back at the forest road. The wind stirred the tall grass, carrying the faintest scent of ash and earth, the memory of the bus. He smiled faintly. For once, he felt the weight of history shift from despair to hope. He knew that while the bus would not return, the lesson it left behind would never fade. Courage, memory, and truth were stronger than fear, stronger than death, stronger than even the darkest curse. And somewhere, far away, Adesuwa's spirit finally rested, free at last. Days passed, and life in the village slowly returned to its rhythm. But the story of the bus and the dead driver became legend overnight. People no longer feared every shadow at night. They remembered Kola Adebayo, the young man who dared to face what no one else could. The road where the bus had appeared remained empty, but sometimes at night, when the wind blew just right, villagers swore they could hear a faint hum in the distance, a reminder of what had been and what could have been again. Mothers whispered to their children, "Do not wander alone. Respect the night. Remember the power of names and the courage to face the unseen." The bus would never appear again, but the story of courage, memory, and redemption would travel for generations, told around fires, under baobab trees, and in whispers on the wind.